Hello and welcome back, Media Talk listeners. For this last episode of this year, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Nicolas Grand, SVP Transformation at Omnicom Media Group. Nicolas, welcome.
Thanks, Manu. And I think it's going to be a very good podcast today because I think we can call it the French Mafia, right? It comes with the French accent.
Indeed. We're both French, but we're both going to do it in English.
We're going to try to do it in English, right? That was the deal, right?
Exactly.
Good.
So before we get into our sort of a topic du jour about attention, could you just tell us a little more about OMG and your role at OMG, which is Omnicom Media Group?
Sure, Manu. So Omnicom Media Group are actually one of the leading global media agency networks around the world. We actually work with around 5,000 clients, and we operate in 70 markets, 70 countries. We've got three main media brands, so OMD, PhD, and Hearts and Science. We also operate Analect, which is our standalone data and tech division that powers our Omni Analytics and Performance platform. And I'm SVP Transformation for Omnicom Media Group. I work in the Global Media Investment Unit. And as part of my role, I'm helping create, promote, and roll out new media metrics or KPIs that can better reflect advertisers' business outcomes. And obviously, attention is a metric that ticks a few boxes there.
Okay. Thank you, Nicolas. That's very clear. You and I had, we had many conversations on a number of topics, but we often end up around measurement, which is still one of the biggest challenges in our media industry. And I also remember when you presented at the Future TV Advertising London last year, and you talked about the rising importance of attention and the steps you're taking in that direction. I think OMG is actually one of the media agency group that is pioneering the concept of attention planning and buying, which I think is becoming a vital piece of campaign effectiveness and of course, sort of cost efficiency. We've seen a sort of a rising interest around attention, which has grown due to probably the inability of online measurements to provide effective reports on ad exposure and the impact of ads on consumer. But I think attention is not very easy to grasp and is often very misunderstood. So I thought, it would be great to dive into the topic and I hope you can bring some clarity and make this a little less confusing. Sure. So my first question leading to this is really probably the most logical is to start with a definition. So can you, what do we mean by attention?
Sure. Yeah, that's the $1 million question. I mean, there are a lot of definitions out there, and some are actually pretty technical, and so it does get very confusing. So, look, let me go back to the basic, because attention effectively helps us answer a big question that pretty much every advertiser has, which is to understand if their ad has actually been seen, and more importantly, right, is the ad delivering any kind of engagement or attention? Because generally, I think everyone can agree that if ads are not noticed, they don't work, right? They don't build your brand. They certainly don't sell your product. And so in that respect, attention is a metric that's a step up from viewability. It's much more valuable to us because we know that something that is viewable is not always viewed. And what drives brand awareness and sales is the actual attention that a campaign generates. So ultimately, we can all agree that it's the consumer's attention that matters, not the opportunity to see. And that's the reason why media agencies like Omnicom Media Group are so keen to leverage attention data so we can optimize both our media planning and our media buying.
But now that we've got that definition, maybe we should look into how does attention work and how do we use attention?
Sure. Well, what's great, Manu, about attention is you can use attention metrics to impact your entire media process, and even beyond, because that can start with optimizing the creative format or your creative content to drive higher attention. But I know today we're going to stick with media planning and buying. So the starting point, obviously planning. And with our Omni data platform, we first look to identify the optimum threshold of attention that each of our brands require. Because it's not a one size fits all, right? If you are McDonald's, you pretty much get instant brand recognition. And if you're hungry, especially, and you see the McDonald's arch, right, we can get your attention very quickly. But if you're selling DNA kits like Ancestry.com, your attention threshold might need to be set a little bit higher. And so our planning teams have built a tool called the Attention Requirement Calculator, which sets the optimum level of attention required for your brand and your campaign. And so that's a starting point. And once that's done, we can start optimizing the media plan and the dollar allocation across media types to optimize on both reach, of course, attention, and cost. So we've got several dimensions there, right? And we use the attention data from eye tracking measurement partners to effectively normalize our media plans so we can get to this optimum level of attention. And so once the planning is done, we can go further into the campaign activation, the buying. And on the buying side, what's really exciting is we can use attention data or attention signals to optimize both the branding campaigns, so upper funnel objectives, and the direct response performance campaigns, so the lower part of the funnel. And we do this in slightly different ways. So for the branding campaigns, we use attention data to optimize our inventory selection, right? So from the vendor selection, channel selection, down to programming types, formats, placements, day parts, and so on. And so we can then create an attention score. So it's a bit like a quality index, if you will. And that's a new indicator of the impact of the campaign. It's part of the output that we communicate to our clients at the end of the campaigns, obviously alongside other metrics such as reach, delivery, and of course the CPM. Mm-hmm. And so for performance campaigns, as you know, Manu, we typically measure success based on the ROI and the cost per conversions or the cost per actions. And so for those type of campaigns, we obviously they're all bought programmatically. Mm-hmm. We use attention signals to create custom bidding algorithms that can help us lower our campaign CPAs. And we can do that because we've got pretty consistent evidence that serving ads to audiences and via media inventory that is more likely to drive higher attention does deliver better performance and ROI.
So from a programmatic standpoint, because you touch upon this, do you have any sort of limitation with data availability?
Yes, absolutely, Manu. For activation, the challenge that we have is we need the ability to optimize to a pretty granular level, right? Ideally spot by spot on television, line by line, placement by placement, format by format on digital. So we do need a lot more granularity than with planning, which can maybe work with more top-level data. And so the difficulty at the moment for our buying teams is to access this real-time campaign-specific eye tracking, facial recognition data. And look, it can still be expensive, and it's not always easily scalable in all markets and across all media. But this is actually changing quite fast. And there's already been a lot of progress made since we last spoke at the Future of TV, I guess almost 12 months ago. We're working with some data partners at the moment to offer our clients with more data and optimization opportunities. We're building more panels as well, and in more markets outside of the main attention markets that are the US, UK, Germany, or Australia. But the solution will also be via using proxy metrics, because we know, for example, that audience engagement and the media impact, so the format, the placement, the dominance on the screen, and so on, all of these can drive attention. They are indicators of attention. So on television, for example, we have some engagement metrics that we use that are already available in existing TV measurement data, right? So we can use those to tweak our TV plans. In programmatic, there's companies like Double Verify, Moat, or IAS that are starting to offer proxy measurements or measures of attention. Again, using existing metrics, existing signals like user engagement. So, for example, scrolling speed, mouse interaction, clicks, and so on.
Which will win? True eye tracking and facial recognition panel, which are probably kind of hard to scale, or wider proxy type solution like Double Verify, authentic attention?
Yeah, so it's a tricky one. I mean, as you know, there's a big rivalry at the moment in the data space between the pure attention measurement firms, the like of Amplified Intelligence, Lumen, Playground, XYZ, and then the proxy metrics providers, I guess, the Double Verify, IAS of this world. They don't truly measure attention, or if you ask Amplified or Playground. But I think, those two worlds are probably going to merge eventually, because nobody seriously thinks that we'll ever be able to have eye tracking devices in every home in the country. I mean, besides the cost, right? When you think about it, I mean, it creates like a million data privacy issues, even if they are opt-in panels and they are, GDPR compliance and so on. Not every consumer in the Western world will want to go for this. Maybe one day, right? You never know, never say never. But as of today, it's very unlikely we can get millions and millions of eye tracking devices. So the reality is eye tracking panels will always have these limited sample sizes. Mm-hmm. And so no matter what, you have to extrapolate the data. You have to create probabilistic models. And so you get into proxy territory anyway, whether you like it or not. So ultimately for agencies at the moment, the best solution is really to make use of both types of data. So eye tracking, facial recognition panels, as well as proxy metrics, especially for activity.
So moving a little from there, do you think that the market will ever trade based on a sort of a cost per attentive second, or what we call ACPM?
Yeah.
As some have suggested.
Yeah. I mean, look, I know there's a lot of talk in the marketplace about this. I personally don't think the market is ready to trade at scale on a cost per attention metric yet. And in fact, at Omnicom, because of this unique approach to attention that I was talking about earlier, we don't think trading with vendors on a guaranteed cost per attention is going to be, say, practical or even really desirable for our clients. And why am I saying this? The first reason is, as we said earlier, that bespoke approach to planning attention that we have adopted at Omnicom, where the optimum levels and the duration of attention is set pretty much on a brand-by-brand basis, right? Like as I said, with the example of McDonald's versus Ancestry.com, they're going to have very different definitions compared to a single definition of attention used by a vendor, right? And by the way, that vendor will probably want to use a definition that will show their inventory in the best possible light, because clearly they want to optimize their yield, and that makes sense. But Manu, full well when the sales side and the vendor side don't speak the same language, it becomes hard to trade on one single currency, right? You need a common base to agree on. Yes. And so I think guaranteed cost per attention as a trading lever is not it's not completely impossible, but I think it will be unlikely and in a near future and actually risky for both parties, right? And also I think, if I can add, it is the agency's role to optimize on attention for our clients. The outcome that we deliver to advertisers is really a combination of many things. And of course, our negotiations with vendors is one component. It's a very important one. But value is also driven by the agency planning and buying process, including internal campaign optimization and curating the right inventory for our clients. based on our own attention data and our custom bidding algorithms. So I think that's important. And the last important point, I think, we know attention is a step up from viewability, right? Yeah. But we also know how viewability has been gamified by some vendors who can promote and serve formats to generate artificial viewability. None of them, but we know who they are. And so we need to be very careful because we're very keen to avoid the same trap with attention, right? Because if attention does become a standardized metric to trade against, there's a risk that what happened to viewability will also happen for attention.
Agreed. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, the sort of broadcasters and we hear a lot on attention from the digital player, but I think the debate has widened to encompass other channels like TV. So how do you work with broadcasters on this? Is this something that is on their radar?
Yes, Manu, it is starting to get on their radar. But one of our challenges over the past 12 months has been really to try to get broadcasters more on board, or at least on board quicker with attention, because we could sense a bit of maybe early suspicion and skepticism from the main TV players across markets, but especially in Europe. And it's actually quite odd because you could argue that when you look at television, we've been buying attention for decades on TV. We just didn't have an accurate way to measure it, or we were not putting a label on it. But when you look for programming that delivers the right context to your audience or delivers the highest affinity or engagement, effectively what you're trying to buy is attention, right?
So what do you think is actually holding back the broadcasters?
Well, I think in the legacy broadcasting world, the challenge is you never had to deal with viewability and fraud issues, which obviously is a good thing, right? But on the other hand, the broadcasting world has been trading on the same metrics, on the same GRP metrics for pretty much 50 years, even like 60 years, over 60 years in North America. And I think what happens is when you are a TV network, look at the very first time you look at attention data on your channel, right? You look at the stats from the likes of TVision, for example. It will show most likely that your channel delivers on average 40% active attention. So now you're thinking as a TV network, as a TV seller, wait a minute, I have been selling 100 GRPs all these years, and now this attention stuff is telling me that only 40 GRPs are effective. And so the worry is it looks bad for TV because all of a sudden you have all this inventory that seems to be wasted. Mm-hmm. But if you pause for a second and compare that level of attention, so the 40%, but also the duration and the dwell time media by media, television performs much, much better than any other media vehicle. Even when we actually convert the attention scores and the duration of attention into cost per attentive second, television looks the most cost effective compared to even basic digital display banners or mobile MPUs. So I think it's really about broadcasters not looking at attention on TV in isolation, but measuring this metric against all other media touchpoints. And suddenly TV looks very, very good. And by the way, we also know that CTV and broadcasters VOD does even better on attention than linear TV. And that's because of the self-selective behavior where effectively viewers actively search and select content that they want to engage with. But I guess back to your original question. So we're starting to work with broadcasters across key markets to help them through the attention journey. We have research evidence, lab studies, case studies that shows that power of television and CTV as an attention driver. And so we're having some great discussions in a few markets. We'll be able to make some announcents actually on collaboration very shortly. So do watch this space.
So that leads to my last question, really. And attention is getting sort of traction, but it's still relatively new. How do you see attention metrics evolving?
Right. Well, I think first of all, we will eventually probably get to some kind of market standardization in terms of the definitions, at least. There's definitely a push for this, and the IAB and the Attention Council are working on that. But I think probably more significantly, are traditional viewability and verification partners, the likes of IAS, DoubleVerify. They'll probably end up integrating more real attention data, eye tracking data, into their proxy measures. And so the lines between data providers will probably get blurry. And in a way, I think the transformation that we're experiencing in the programmatic space right now is going to help in those discussions on attention. Because with the death of the cookie, the programmatic world is almost kind of pushed into using those old-fashioned recipes from the world of offline media. Think about contextual targeting. Now, thanks to programmatic, it's now back in fashion, and we know there's a very strong link between context and attention. But also think about Google with their topics or flocks, however they call it these days. It's basically a panel, right? Yeah. So we're going full circle here, and that means it will become more natural for the pure digital players like the DoubleVerify or the DSPs to rely more on panel type solutions, on proxy metrics, and probabilistic modeling. So I think we're going to see those two worlds merge, kind of in the same way we expect the linear TV and the CTV worlds to turn into one. And so that's going to allow us to look at some very interesting data and activation opportunities for attention. And that will help us actually cover the whole media spectrum with attention.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, it looks like measurement is still going to evolve massively in the coming sort of years. We're already at time, Nicolas. Thank you so much for your insights on this.
Thanks so much.
But fascinating subject. I think there's a lot more to come. It was a great session, and I hope our Media Talk listeners enjoyed our conversation as much as I did. I have to say it certainly helped me to better understand this notion of attention and how it can be used to ultimately enhance the impact of advertising. Thank you very much, Nicolas.
Thanks so much, Manu, and thanks for your attention.
No problem. And obviously, thank you for tuning in to all our Media Talk listeners. And I'm very much looking forward to more episodes next year, starting in January. And until then, I will wish everyone a successful end of Q4, a joyful end of the year, and best wishes for 2023. Goodbye.
Media Talks, the podcast that helps to better understand the world of media and video advertising.